Along with Brian Wiegand.
And right now we are joined by Glenn Youngkin. He is the Republican nominee for governor in Virginia. Glenn, good morning. Welcome back to the program.
Good morning, Brian and Mary. I hope everybody's well.
Doing well. Hope you are too. Let's jump right in here because we do have some listener questions that we need to get to as well. You have a very different idea of what to do with the money from the federal government as well as Virginia's surplus. You're calling this Funding Virginia's Future. And I noticed in the release here you have a gentleman, Mr. Fisher, who is talking about the anti-business climate that is taken over in Virginia. But we were just named number one for business by CNBC. That's a difficult claim to make, is it not?
Well, I think that, first of all, I'm very, very happy to receive accolades as a homegrown Virginian and proud Virginian. But Virginia hasn't been performing as the best state to do business. And I think this is the difference between having a ranking in a CNBC poll and actual performance. And we've watched the states around us, Maryland and Tennessee and North Carolina, South Carolina and Georgia over the last 8 years grow their economies substantially faster than Virginia. And in fact, we've watched particularly the states to the south of us grow their jobs much faster than Virginia. And that's actually resulting in the reality that Virginia families are starting to move away. And we watch Virginia families move away faster to the other states than they're moving from the other states to Virginia. And this is a canary in the coal mine for all of us. And so we need to recognize that we have to get our economy growing, and we got to keep up and compete with our peer states. And we see it every day. We see businesses choosing not to come to Virginia, but to go to the other states. We see families moving to other states. We see Virginia's businesses not growing fast enough. And that's why when I put forth our Invest in All Virginia's investment plan, the top of the list was to recognize that we have a huge surplus that was generated during the pandemic, which means that we overtaxed people, and we need to give that money back to Virginia taxpayers. And so I actually called for a tax refund for all Virginians. And then the money that's coming from the federal government, we have to invest in growing our businesses, and we need to fully fund the unemployment trust fund. And unfortunately, the Democrats only partially funded it, which is going to put a real burden on small businesses for every employee they actually have in their employment. We need to invest in broadband. I think we need to really get broadband lit up across Virginia quickly. And we need to invest in projects that will grow the economy. I also called for us to put $1.2 billion back into our schools and in families with kids in schools, and to invest $500 million in rescuing law enforcement in our mental health system. And I think that there were some compromises made to increase funding for this retention bonus to our law enforcement heroes, but it didn't go far enough in my mind. And I think we need to make sure that we keep our law enforcement heroes on the job as opposed to letting them retire like they are right now. My opponent, Terry McAuliffe, wants to get rid of qualified immunity, which is going to drive mass retirements in law enforcement. We can't afford it right now because we have a 20-year high in murder rate. And we've got to get serious about getting our crime back under control in Virginia.
I want to ask you two questions as far as taxes go with your plan. One, details as far as the rebate. Is it so much per taxpayer per what you have paid? And then Peter also wants to know, will you propose getting rid of the income tax in Virginia if you are elected governor?
Yes, so first of all, the rebate that I called for was $300 for an individual filer and $600 for joint filers. And that would go to everyone who filed and paid taxes. And I think Virginians need to recognize that I think it's their money. My opponent thinks it's his money, but I know that money belongs to all Virginians. And then with regards to tax rates on a go-forward basis, we're just in Virginia, we can't get rid of our state income tax, but we can sure try to bring it down. And it is an important part of funding our government. It can't go to zero like in Tennessee and Florida, but we can certainly bring it down. And that's one of the things that I'm really focused on when I go work for all Virginians as the next governor.
We're speaking with Glenn Youngkin, and I was reading more about your plan to give families $600 and children a $500 school voucher, and all the way to return the tax dollars, return the surplus to the people who paid for it. I wonder if people, though, as a lot of people have gotten used to getting those stimulus checks from the government, are they able to differentiate this? They're just thinking, well, we don't care who's giving it to us. It's just more money coming in. I mean, will they be able to recognize this plan?
Well, right at the heart of this is the just basic philosophy that Virginia is taxing Virginians too much. And in fact, it's just reflected by this giant surplus that was created in the middle of a pandemic where people are actually trying to make ends meet and are really struggling to get their businesses back online and get back into the job market. And yet Virginia overtaxed folks. I mean, they actually taxed the PPP loans that went to small businesses. And so this is Virginia's money, and I think that a reasonably large proportion of it should go back to Virginians. And as far as distinguishing between federal funds for folks that were really needing them over the course of the last year, and this is quite a different statement. I'm saying this is Virginia's money. It belongs to Virginians, not to the government, and we should give it back.
Now, I want to ask a question from Neil here, and he notes that Republicans are not favored by the demographic changes that have happened in the last couple of decades in Virginia, and wants to know, how are you going to bring back voters in, say, Richmond, D.C. suburbs, Virginia Beach, who used to vote for Republicans but haven't in the last few cycles?
Well, what we're seeing in this campaign is that we're bringing together Virginians. It's not just Republicans against Democrats, but it's Virginians standing up together and saying no to this left liberal progressive agenda, which really has driven defunding and demoralizing and depleting law enforcement. It's actually really caused severe downgrade in the standards in our schools, and so our kids haven't been held to the high standards that Virginia used to have. I mean, people used to move to Virginia for our schools, and that's not happening anymore. And, of course, we must get our job machine turned back on. And Virginia has trailed in job recovery to states run by Republican governors. And, in fact, what's happened now is we have 200,000 less jobs today than we had before the pandemic. And so these are the basic kitchen table issues that we must get focused on: the safest communities, the best schools, and the best jobs. And this is bringing people together across Virginia. And as I said, not just Republicans, but independents and Democrats. Most places I go, we end up with discussions afterwards where people come up to me and say, Glenn, I'm a lifetime Democrat, but I'm going to vote for you because the direction of our state is wrong and we got to get moving in a different direction. And so I've been so encouraged across Virginia as people are coming together to really stand up and say we're going to actually elect a different kind of governor who's not a career politician. I am not a career politician. I'm a business guy who knows how to get things done and deliver results.
What do you say when voters come up to you and they believe that the election results were a fraud and that Donald Trump really won the election?
Yeah, this is one of the difficult topics that lots of Virginians are struggling with, and I start with that Terry McAuliffe actually in 2020, in the year 2000, said that the election of George W. Bush was not right, and he actually said it was stolen from Al Gore, and he never acknowledged that George W. Bush was the legitimate president. The reality is that this is not a Republican issue, it's not a Democrat issue, it's a democracy issue. And so what we have to do is press forward and look ahead. I mean, Joe Biden, as I've said many times, he's our legitimate president. He's in the White House. He's signing executive orders. I wish he wasn't signing executive orders and doing the things he's doing, but he is. And our next best chance to actually get the White House back is going to be the election in 2024. So we have to focus on 2021. And in 2021, as I said, Virginians are coming together to elect a different kind of governor. And we have to look forward and make sure that we turn out, that we register voters, that we, in fact, express our views and get Virginia moving in a different direction by electing Glenn Youngkin as governor and Winsome Sears as lieutenant governor and Jason Miyares as attorney general and get Virginia moving.
So the North administration has recently made it known that schools across the country are going to be expected to have all students and staff masked up at all times because of the changing CDC guidelines. We've seen a local county here, Bedford, go from an optional policy now that they will enforce this. Do you think it's important enough to get kids back in class 5 days a week to make the trade-off that everybody's going to wear a mask?
Well, the single highest priority is to get our kids back in school 5 days a week. And we've heard nothing from Terry McAuliffe last year when the schools were unnecessarily closed. And we watched Ralph Northam do nothing to try to get our schools open again. And we watched school boards, in fact, impose their will on families. And as a result, Virginia's kids have suffered. I mean, we have suffered. The kids have absolutely fallen behind. Families have suffered. People had to stay home from work. There's a substantial increase in mental health challenges in Virginia and social challenges in Virginia because our schools were closed. We must get our schools open. No questions asked. 5 days a week, in-person teaching. And I do believe that we should allow the parents to make the decision for their children as to what's best with regards to wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. And it should be families' decisions. They should be well informed to make those decisions. And it's just like I have said with the vaccine. I strongly encourage everybody to get the vaccine, but it's an individual decision. I've gotten the vaccine because it was a decision that I made based on my own health needs. But I think people need to be able to make these decisions. It's a personal decision, but I encourage everybody, and please hear me now, encourage everybody to get the vaccine if you want to get it. Please get it. We actually have a challenge in Virginia today where African-American communities and Latino communities actually have a much lower vaccination rate than the other communities. And we need to go to work and make sure that we've fully educated everybody that the vaccine is the best way to prevent getting COVID-19. But again, it needs to be an individual decision, not something imposed by Richmond.
And we have one more question here from Mark, who has a long memory of your opponent here. And it's that when Terry McAuliffe was governor, he lost $1.3 million of taxpayer money to essentially a Chinese scam. This money is supposed to be spent at Appomattox. And Mark is wondering, given that Appomattox suffered from this debacle, do you have anything specific in your plan to help that part of the state?
Well, first of all, that indeed did happen, and my opponent signed a deal with a Chinese company that ended up being a fraud and lost Virginians over $1 million of taxpayer money. And all he could say is, I hope we get the money back. I mean, he was absolutely taken advantage. He would absolutely let the Chinese just run all over him. And we can't let that happen. That's the difference between somebody who knows how to do business, who's built business and knows how to create jobs, and somebody who doesn't. And with regards to business development, particularly in parts of Virginia whose economy has not grown as fast as the rest of Virginia, we have to get really focused. We do need to press forward with high-speed internet access for everybody. It must happen. It must happen fast. I really think this has been so slow. I mean, Terry McAuliffe was calling for high-speed internet access to rural Virginia back in 2009 and 2013, and he didn't get it done. Well, I'll get it done. I will absolutely make sure that we, in fact, are able to have all Virginians fully participate in online school, online job opportunities, and actually connect into the internet at a high-speed, affordable rate. That's job number one. But we also can bring companies to so many parts of Virginia that, in fact, have not seen the kind of economic development they should see. There should be logistics hubs. There should absolutely be manufacturing. We've watched our manufacturing base just move away and disappear. And again, that has happened under Terry McAuliffe and Ralph Northam, as we've watched so many other states, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, win over and over and over again opportunities to bring great jobs to Virginia, and we, in fact, have lost. And we're going to stop losing. We're going to start winning, and that's what Virginia needs, and that's what I hope to go do when I go work for all Virginians.
We're speaking with Glenn Youngkin, and it's summertime. I think a lot more people will be paying a lot closer attention to this after Labor Day. That's traditionally when these Virginia's political race heats up for governor. And what do you think is going to be the hot topic of this race? What's it all going to boil down to? Because you've been talking a lot about critical race theory, you've been talking a lot about COVID, you've been talking a lot about tax refunds, but what's it all going to boil down to for this race?
Well, first, this race, based on the latest public poll, is neck and neck. I mean, literally, as we head into September, this race is absolutely statistically tied based on the most recent public polls. And so here we go, where Virginians have to make a decision. Who do they want to, in fact, lead this Commonwealth going forward? Terry McAuliffe had his chance, and he didn't do a good job. And can we really trust him to actually go do it again when he didn't do it the first time? And I think this is the decision that Virginians need to make. Who can they trust? Who can they trust to go get things done and deliver results? And we have to have the best jobs. We need to have the best schools, and we have to have the safest communities. And I think these are the issues. Every time I gather with Virginians, and the crowds are huge across this great Commonwealth that we're meeting with, and we're hearing from everybody, not just Republicans, but independents and Democrats, which is we have to get out of this pandemic and get the job machine turned back on. We're worried about excellence in our schools, and we want our schools to return to be the best in the country, not having brought down the standards like Terry McAuliffe did, so that we actually are 50th in the country when it comes to standards for reading and math for eighth graders, which is what he's done. And finally, we have to get our communities back as being the safest in the country. And right now, we have this high, 20-year high in murder rate, and we're watching law enforcement communities be depleted from a manpower standpoint, and we've got to get moving on these things. And so these are the issues that are top of mind for Virginians. These are the issues that I will deliver results on, and this is why I'm so confident that I'm going to have the great privilege of going to work for all Virginians next year as the 74th governor.
All right, Glenn Youngkin, Republican candidate for governor. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you both, and I hope you have a great day.
You too. It's 8:52 on the Morning Line. We'll be right back.